welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us here tonight. My name's Mike Zeller. I'm the Assistant Director here at the library. So some of you may know this is the last in our series of radical empathy programs. We had gotten a grant about a year ago to fund a series of programs based around empathy and understanding. But hopefully this will not be our last community conversation. We've got some bigger plans with this series, just to have people from our community here engaged in conversation, just helping to understand one another. So before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. So all of you who registered online will receive a survey tomorrow. Just real quick, maybe 2-3 minutes. If you could fill that out, it's just asking some questions about what you thought about tonight's program. It's a huge help for us. It helps us plan more programs, and also we need to give data to the survey, the grant sponsoring agency, so that would be very helpful. So the structure for tonight, I'm going to have each of our I will introduce our panelists, and then I'll have them kind of give a little encapsulation of their immigration story. And then we're going to kind of open things up. If you want to ask questions, they may talk amongst themselves with answers. I've got some questions. So we really just wanted to encourage having a real conversation tonight. So if there's anything that jumps into mind, if there's anything that you're curious about that you'd like to know or understand better, just pop your hand up. Don't hesitate. I'll be moderating, trying to keep an eye on making sure everybody gets a chance to talk. So yeah, I would like to introduce our four panelists tonight, our four brave panelists who volunteered for this. Going from my right to left, Shiwen Chen, who is one of our own library staff members here. Then we've got Raghu Ranganathan, Ashish Kalagi, and Cosmos Karadimitriou. I super apologize if I butchered everyone's name. I tried so hard. So yeah, starting with Shiwen, if you want to just give a quick encapsulation of what it was like immigrating to the U.S.
Well, I came to U.S. when I was 18. That's 41 years ago. It's 1981. And then I arrived to join my father. Came my mother, my sister, and my brothers. We live in Cambridge. My father settled in Cambridge in 1971, I believe so. So after a while, my father has business down in Cranston, Rhode Island. So I worked with my dad for several years. Later on, after I got married, then we moved. My husband and I moved to New York City. And that was a great move. And that was tough as well. Anyway, after my husband got his master's degree and we moved to Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, that's very south. And then we moved around quite a bit within like 5 years. I have been living, I live upstate New York and then Vermont. And we turned around, coming back to Shrewsbury, Massachusetts again. Yeah, because of our family and the reason we picked Shrewsbury is the town offers a great school district for our children. We have 3 kids, and they all attend the Shrewsbury school system. And we have been living here for 29 years. And then I be working at library for almost 10 years. And then I'm also a Shrewsbury Council member as well. So anything that you want to ask me, you can.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Raghu, and I've lived in Shrewsbury about 15 years. I came to the States in 1993, and I was not as young as she was. I did my PhD in India, and I came here for further education and job opportunities. So it was kind of a pattern growing up doing PhD. All my seniors were looking for postdoctoral and research opportunities in the US or in Europe. So US seemed very accessible at that time and looked like a land of opportunities to come and settle in. So pursued that, and got an opportunity to come here for a postdoctoral research. So I came in '93 into Connecticut. And fortunately or unfortunately, I was married at that time, so I didn't have to feel lonely at that point, because a lot of people, when you come for the first time immigrate, you feel alone if you don't have family. So I was glad I came with my wife. She came in as a student as well at that time, so we were both kind of students, quote unquote, and settled down in Connecticut. We lived there for about 11 years doing research and trying to plan our life career path ahead in sciences. I'm in the molecular biology, biotechnology area, and Connecticut was a great place. I was at Yale University for about 7 years, and then got into research and development. And job situation took me from Connecticut to California. So I was in California for 3 years after living in Connecticut for 11 years. And I worked there for about 3 years in the LA area. And then another opportunity arose for me to come back here to this area. And there are multiple reasons for that, to come here back to the East Coast, but came back in 2007 for another job opportunity. And found this place, Shrewsbury, was highly recommended by most people that I asked who were in the Boston area in Massachusetts. And settled here. My kids, I have 2 daughters. Both of my daughters went through the Shrewsbury public school system. They both graduated. One is doing her PhD now in Duke University. The other one is doing her undergrad in UMass. And I think the school system is awesome and very supportive and gives a good background. And we've been patrons of the library the whole time being here. And I also am on the board of trustees for the Shrewsbury Public Library Foundation. And also participate in the India Society of Worcester, which is another organization. So I'll stop there and let Ashish go.
Awesome story. So hi everybody. My name is Ashish Pawlaki. So I have maybe a slightly more accidental coming to America story. So my daughter is in the audience, and she should probably close her ears for this. But I was a terrible student, at least by Indian standards. So no higher ed for me. I finished my bachelor's in engineering in India, and like all my peers, wanted to go into the IITs, which is the higher education in India, get a master's and get a PhD. Of course, my scores were only in like the 97%, which means I was a failure, right? So I had started a little, small business, literally working out of my bedroom at home, my parents' house. And one of my clients at that time had a cousin who was starting a business in Boston. And we happened to meet at one point, and he said, "Why don't you come work for me?" I was 22. I remember telling my parents, let me spend a couple of years there, see what it's like, and then I'll be back. So it has been 26, 27 years since that, right? And here I am. I think, the good fortune to have lots of wonderful opportunities in this country. Had a chance, my wife and I had a chance to travel extensively, but I used to have a traveling job, and the last year that I did that, I remember I did something like 32 states in 1 year. And I have to say, I could never find a place quite like where we were. And so we could have literally settled down anywhere in the country, but that was probably the only choice that we made actively, which was to settle down in Massachusetts. When we moved to Shrewsbury, it was almost 20 years ago. We moved here because this was the only place we could afford a home, coming sort of traveling west from first Boston to Waltham to Framingham to, this is where we could afford a home. But I have to tell you, I mean, just in the last 20 years, I feel like we've found a home in Shrewsbury. And whether it's the library, whether it's any of the other things that we do around town, certainly the India Society of Worcester, which I've been quite actively associated with, the town feels like home. And we were just telling somebody the other day, you know, Shrewsbury is a large town, it's not a small town, but it feels like a much more intimate place than it is. So feel lucky to be here.
Nice, yes. And I heard you saying that you came here for opportunity. I think this is the land of opportunity. That's why I think it's safe to say that we all came here for the same reason, for the opportunities. So, my name is Cosmas again, and I'm originally from Greece. And I grew up and went to college in Greece, did my military service, it's mandatory. And when I was 25 years old, I decided to come to the United States for a graduate school. And in the beginning, I went to Louisiana, and I lived there with my now wife for 7 years before we come here to Massachusetts. And we came for jobs in Massachusetts. And then we were looking for which place in Massachusetts, which community to make our home. And my wife's job is in Worcester, and most of my jobs are in Boston because I'm in the technology. She's in academia, she cannot switch easily, but I can switch very easily. So anyway, we made the decision, we chose a community that is closer to my wife's job, but also a community that we could afford, because you're very right. When we were looking, it was back in 98, when we were looking at house prices, literally every town over was like $50,000, $100,000 more for the same house. So Shrewsbury had everything. It had very good schools. All the ratings, the rankings were pretty good. A town we could afford. Fairly easy access to Boston because of Mass Pike and Route 9. And so that's why we made our home here ever since. And that is now 23 years ago that I'm in Shrewsbury. 3 children, I have 3 daughters, and all 3 went through the Shrewsbury school system, very good schools. Particularly from the elementary school, I remember I was blown away, by the schools, because it was so different from the experience that I had growing up in Greece, and I believe in most parts of the world, where, you know, it was very strict environment, you know, the blackboard and the strict teacher with, you know, and here it was complete. I mean, you go to elementary school and the kids are sitting around, you know, playing together and learning by playing. So heartwarming, so such an incredible experience. And I remember telling my kids since they were very young, you're in paradise. You better appreciate this, because you don't know what's the alternative. And I was trying to tell them what were my experiences growing up. Of course, they cannot get it, the kids. But anyway, this is what I was always telling them. And yeah, we've been very happy here. Now all kids are gone to college, and another phase in life starts for us. So, yeah.
Great. So, yeah, everyone has introduced themselves, given a little bit of their background. We'll open it up. Does anybody have any questions based off of what they've heard? Or do any of you want to ask each other questions or respond to anything like that? Otherwise,
I know you say you move here. We all say the price of the house because it's something that we can afford. That's true. My husband always want a garage. So when you want a garage, you have to go west, right? Yeah. So when we live in upstate New York, we get a lot of snow. And he said, I'm not scared anymore snow. So yeah, when I saw we only saw like 1 or 2 houses when we came to see the house in Shrewsbury. I pick out the brochure. It's a great school district. I said, that's it. That's all we want to go. So when we moved here, my oldest started kindergarten. So it was perfect time for us. Yeah, we love it.
did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I was born here and very fortunate, very happy to be born here. But my grandparents, they came over from Ireland on the boat. Okay, so they were immigrants. And they died before I was, well, I think I had just been born, they died. And then my parents also died early, so I never really got to ask, how was it? Because I did know a few things. My mother had said that, you know, her dad had a hard time when he came over, trying to get work, trying to get through the systems. Now that was, I mean, I don't even know what year or anything. So I was just wondering how you found coming over to this country. How are we as far as integrating everyone? You know, are we, you know, it's hard. I believe it's very hard. So I was just wondering if anybody.
Go ahead. No, I mean, if I had to think of a word to describe, you know, what the reception was, I would say it was welcoming and affectionate, right? You know, and regardless of where in the country, I mean, maybe there are a couple of exceptions I can think of, right, in the last 25 years, but overwhelmingly, I think, if I had to say one word about the spirit of America, I would say that it continues to be welcoming and affectionate, right? You know, you said what was it like? I think you know, just moving to a different. You know, my son is now getting ready to move for college, and we've been looking at, you know, how different each school feels, right? Now imagine moving, you know, 20,000 miles. In a time when we moved, I think most of us, there was no internet, you know, there was very little sort of, you know, whatever you had to learn about a place would come from a book, you know, talking to people, that kind of thing. And so certainly I think all of us probably have stories to tell about the first, you know, 6 months and all the cultural faux pas that we committed, right? I remember going into McDonald's and ordering pizza. Right, but you know, that's where we were. But you know, I think that's the beautiful thing about America is that you know, there is this sense, like you say, that we're all sort of you know, maybe not in this generation or 2 generations before, we all can relate to this notion of somebody arriving and making their home here. And I've certainly felt that welcome. I don't know what you
Yeah,
would say.
totally. Did you wanna?
Yeah, definitely. I think for my dad's generation, they are still struggling. You know, my dad already deceased, but he worked very hard. For my generation, we got a little better because the opportunity opened up for us, and we got to, you know, find a dream job. Like my husband, when he graduated from grad school, his first job was at work for IBM. That was a dream job. We had the great thing about America is this opportunity opened up for everybody, but it's hard, but it's possible. Yeah, that's great about it. Yeah, for us, I'm very grateful. But still, I see many people, even new immigrants coming, they struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Because
think-
the language is hard, the culture and then traditions is not easy to change. But yeah.
Yeah. I agree, that's the difficult part, the culture and the feeling of home, right? So it takes a while to build that, and having a good neighborhood, having somebody that you're familiar with, and I think that'll definitely make a difference. For me, the process itself was very easy because it was just a official legal process, sign off and get a visa and just come in. And the lab, the host that I was coming here to, the professor, she had made arrangements for me for everything. She had even rented out a little apartment for me. Bought a bunch of vessels for cooking.
Oh, you're
and she
lucky.
kept- yeah.
Wonderful.
She
Yeah.
kept it in the kitchen, and she went to the grocery store, brought bread and, you know, jam and butter, and left it in the fridge. And She sent one of her students to the airport to pick me up from the airport. I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing that can happen, you know. And then I came first, and my wife came later, a month later. So I was like, I should do something better for my wife. So I bought a whole lot of stuff and filled up the fridge. I had 3 different flavors of ice cream. That was like amazing. Yeah. And so I really felt welcome coming in here, and the people around me made us feel welcome. So yeah, definitely a good experience. But you start missing home, you know, after you come here.
Yeah.
And those days, this was early 90s. I remember wanting to call back home, and it would cost us $3 per minute.
Yeah.
$3 a minute to call long distance.
Wow.
And we'd get paid as a student very little, so our biggest bill was the telephone bill. It was bigger than the rent bill, right? So we had to make sure we stay within budget, and the technology was that tough year. Imagine how it was back in India, right? So my family didn't even have a phone, so we had to call the neighbor's house, tell them, I'm going to call back in 5 minutes. Can you please go bring my brother over? And then they'd call him, and I had to wait for 5 minutes, call back again, and yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But then you get used to it.
And we used letters. I came in '91, so we sent letters to parents, to friends, because that was the cheapest way to communicate. The only problem is you had to wait a month before you get the reply back. Also at that time, since there was no internet, no web, we didn't have information. We didn't know where we're going, what we're doing. We knew nothing, like a black hole. You know, you get an airplane ticket, you arrive somewhere, and you know nothing about the place. When I arrived, fortunately, I was able to establish a connection with one other person from Greece through letters again. So at least he was waiting for me, and he picked me up from the airport, and that was down in Louisiana. But my biggest difficulty when I arrived is I didn't have a car. And without a car here in the US, in most places, you're like handicapped. You cannot do anything. In other parts of the world, in Europe, India probably, you know, you can take the bus. You know, there is mass transit that you can use. But here, in many places, there is nothing like that. I mean, think about Shrewsbury. It's very hard. There is some buses that go around, but they don't go everywhere. They're not sufficient. So if someone doesn't have a car here, they are literally like a prisoner in their own house. And that was my biggest difficulty back then. Although I was in university, but I couldn't get out of the university to go shopping or so. But you know, I bought a car very quickly within 6 months, and fortunately, that was something you could do in a very cheap way here in America, as opposed to other parts of the world, I guess. And that kind of gave me the freedom to move around, and that was one of the first problems I could overcome. But that was the biggest problem in the beginning.
And it's surprising, you know, we don't even think about it these days. So I was, you know, to your story about not having a car, you know, when I first came here, I used to live in Waltham, you know, in a shared apartment. And somebody we knew said, you know, hey, there's this thing called the India Day Festival in Worcester. Come on down, right? And I said, you know, I was really looking for, you know, familiar food and trying to, you know, sort of recreate that feeling of back home. And I said, sure. And of course, to get from Waltham to Worcester without a car means you have to take 2 buses into Boston, then get on a commuter rail to Worcester, and then try to wait for another bus to take you to wherever the thing was. And so it's, you know, but I think it's all part of that experience. And, you know, now looking back, it just feels like a magical time.
I remember walking to the grocery store with backpacks, you know, walk 1.5 miles, fill it up in a backpack and come back home till we bought the first car. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so you were kind of lucky in that you had this support system. So I came to work for a really small company, and they had put us up, we were talking about information. So my image of America was, Manhattan. I grew up in Bombay, which is a big city on its own right, and I was expecting to find, Manhattan. And the first place where this company said, we'll put you up for a week in a motel, and then you've got to find your own apartment. And that motel happened to be in Ayer, Massachusetts, which is a town that's like, a few miles long, and I was just completely surprised about where I'd gotten. The only supermarket there, the first time you walk in, the day after you land, you wake up, you go into a completely foreign environment, right? Just trying to check out in a supermarket where, there's nobody sort of behind the counter helping you. Was an experience, I remember seeing this big watermelon, and the big, huge sign says 59 cents. And I said, wow, look at this country, stuff is so cheap. Because it was, 59 cents a pound.
Right.
And at that was the time, I had like, $20 in my pocket, so the watermelon ended up being, $9. We had watermelon for lunch for the rest of the week, right? Yeah, fun times.
Well, I remember first car that we bought, we were so poor then. Oh, I think we literally emptied the bank account to buy the old motorboat because for the safety, you live in New York City. If you work until 1 o'clock, it's very dangerous. Back then, the New York is different than now. So to take a subway home, my husband got wrecked a couple times. So he said, I think, yeah, it's better you get a car for your safety. So we did. We bought a car. We almost emptied our bank account. So life was different. And for immigrants, that's why Chinatown, like any kind of place like that, it's very important for immigrants to starting point of their life, because there's a support system there. And then people speak their language. That makes a big difference. So.
That's a great point. I mean, it's hard to, I think, overestimate what an important role language plays, right?
Right.
So there's one thing about America which is sort of unique, is that overwhelmingly, we speak one language, right? We all come from, I think, places where, even in Europe, right, you don't have to travel that far to encounter a new language. And I think if you don't speak English, or at least speak English well, then that immigration experience, I think, ends up being quite different. I remember I used to have a friend who moved from China. Just we almost moved together, and he got his first car. Was very proud of it. Probably speeding a little bit, and he got pulled over, the side of a road by a policeman, and he had seen all these Hollywood movies where, the hero sort of rolls down the window and he says, "Is there a problem, officer?" So my friend rolls down his window and he says, "What's your problem, officer?" He didn't escape the ticket. Right?
Well, as a teacher in the Shrewsbury Public Schools, an elementary school teacher, I want to say thank you, and I think I had Jennifer.
Oh my God! You?
So I had one of her children.
Yes. She's old now.
So I've been here over 30 years teaching in Shrewsbury, and thank you all for the compliments. I will take it on, and thank you for all the teachers that your students have had. But with all the things that you've encountered and that you've seen and that you've been through, what is it that the school department can get better from either how you handle things with teachers or just enrolling your students? Like, what is it that we can do better there?
I think, it would be remiss of me not to say that, there's a tremendous amount that the school district does well, right? And very well. So I certainly share the comments that all of the panelists have made about, it's been a tremendous school district. I think as with any new experience, right, there's always things that we can learn. And in that vein, I think one of the things that I found we had to learn as parents was this sort of completely new culture and a new approach to teaching and learning, right? And the expectation of what school is, or even for that matter, what a library is, right, is different enough across some of these countries that we've come from. That that is sometimes a learning experience. And I know people who sometimes struggled with communicating with teachers what that experience should be, right, or what expectations should be of the child. So maybe there's room to sort of have a little bit more of education there for the parents, especially new immigrants. But I really think that's really you're talking about sort of really trying to dot the I's and cross the T's. I can't really think of anything significant.
Right. And I agree with you. I mean, I do think it's a really great system. I wouldn't have stayed as long, if I didn't agree with that too. And I think as, across the board, I think we do work really hard for that. But I would, if you think of something, that we should, that we're not thinking about or whatever, I would just, it would just be for me. I mean, I'm not going to report it to anybody or whatever, but, I just, I find with, so when I came to Shrewsbury, that's where I saw my, first South Asian students, because I grew up in Western Massachusetts, out in the boonies, where we had, the one African-American child in like the whole entire school. So for me, having children that were South Asian, or having, children, whose families had come from China or from other places, that was all new to me. So I've changed my approach over the years, but, are there any, suggestions that you might have too?
One thing that came to my mind was, I don't know if I want to label it as bullying, but in the bus, right? Yeah. So I don't know how much a teacher can get in that situation, but the school system, I think, can make an impact there. Because the kids, when they come out of an Indian family or a Chinese family, they're coming out of the kitchen, the mother wants to cook stuff, and they might smell like spices. Right? They smell different. And a lot of them may not be aware of that. So what I've heard or seen is some of these kids, when they get into the bus, they get, called names, or things get said and done in the bus. And a lot of the kids come back home affected by this.
And they in the lunchroom too?
And they can't go, and they don't want to complain against their fellow students. And it's a very delicate situation. I don't know if systematically or systemically something can be done to that. And it's not a Shrewsbury thing. It's going to be everywhere, right?
Totally.
But if you want to proactively do something, maybe that's something that I might bring up.
I think over the years we have gotten a little bit better with that, at least at the elementary level. I know that we've talked about it. There's some really great, children's picture books that are really fantastic. About doing that. I think we've done a better job, but there's always more work to do, right?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate your insight, so thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say for my thank you for all the Shrewsbury Public School System teachers. I'm not just speak for myself. My children has done it wonderful. Receiving so much through schools.
And good parents too.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah. So it's kind of, I feel like ancient because my kid graduate. The youngest one is 2015, graduate from high school. So I think at school in overall they're doing pretty well. Like at high school, for example,
Oh,
they
yeah.
offer different type of food once a while.
Yeah.
People get excited. Maybe introducing food to a student that could help different cultures, different backgrounds.
Good.
I think
love
that will help.
Thank you, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I do want to say though that this goes both ways, right? I mean, as the diversity of the student body in Shrewsbury schools has grown, so I had the opportunity to serve on the portrait of a graduate
Thank you
committee,
for doing
right?
that.
When we built it, and what we realized was that not only so there is a certain experience that a second generation immigrant children have as a part of the school district, but really one of the things we talked about is being part of a diverse school district is actually enriching for the entire student body, right? And everybody grows up to be better citizens of the world because they live in a more diverse school district such as ours. And so I just want to make the point that it actually works both ways.
Yeah. And this is something, you asked for some feedback, some things that could be done better. I think maybe what could be done better is to, for the immigrant kids to feel more inclusive. Maybe arrange activities, for example, where kids mingle with each other randomly and they don't divide. Because I noticed through the years, from my kids' experience, that many children tend to segregate on their own,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
create
no,
their own clothes.
I've seen that too.
Yes, and they don't interact with each other. So try to break this pattern from the teacher's side by organizing, common activities, and you force them to interact with each other. And maybe become buddies for, I don't know, a month on certain projects or something like that.
Yeah.
Because this is something that could be improved. But overall, I should say that the school system is at a completely different level than where I grew up, and I don't have many suggestions. I was fortunate enough to observe them because I was volunteering, starting from elementary school, going into the classroom once a week, twice a week sometimes, and then later on middle school I was volunteering for science, and then in high school I was coaching the speech and debate and other. So I was trying to get involved with my kids' education and see from the inside how it is their school experience. And this is something that I would like maybe to ask. Parents don't know what is the school life for the children, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But parents don't know that, don't see that. And for me, this was a way to see how it is the everyday school for them. And I loved that. I loved going to elementary school and sitting in the classroom. And, I was helping out, but I was observing and I was amazed, and I loved that as a parent. And if I didn't that, others who didn't do that didn't have this experience, right? So maybe find ways to involve parents more. I liked even the curriculum nights, not so much for the curriculum, but because I could go into the school and see the teachers and see the classrooms. So maybe have curriculum nights twice. I don't know, making things up. But the idea is to have the parents get a little bit more involved and see what's going on in the school. Give them this opportunity. Because don't assume that the children will tell them. Children usually, particularly if they reach teenage years, they say nothing to the parents.
Yeah.
So we have no idea as parents what's going on in school, right? How is the school today? How was the lesson?
Fine.
Yes.
That's the answer. Fine.
Well, for me, it's like I'm gonna stand the other point of view. For immigrants, I say for us, like we have to encourage our children to engage activities in town, like in Netherlands. Join a baseball team or football or whatever, like a basketball. I think soccer's when they're young, so that's the best time they can be friends, engage with each other.
Right.
When children's in the field, they totally react different with their friendships. In school, maybe there's another pressures over their head.
Mhm.
So that's my encouragement.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Question for all of you. From the point of view of your kids, have you ever felt that they had a clash of cultures? When they were, say, like 10 or 12 years old, they want to do what their parents tell them at home, but they go to school and the kids that they interact with, tell them, no, that's not how I do stuff with my parents. It's so different. So did they ever have that struggle, like, this friend's mom said this, but you're not letting me do this? Or
Yeah.
did they
You know,
have
the
that
answer
kind
is
of-
yes, right?
Huh?
The answer is yes. And that's one of the bigger challenges for us. And for them too, growing up in two different cultures, right? And in a way, both are right for them, and they don't know what to choose, and conveniently they get to pick what's right, what they feel is beneficial for them. And I think as parents, we have to be mindful of that and learn from our cues and set standards for them and say, with our culture, this is what we think is right. Maybe for your friend, based on their culture, that could be right. But when you're living here, you do this, and when you're not here, you can do what you want. But it is a challenge.
Yeah. You know how they say it takes a village, right? And to raise a child, and I feel like the village influences the child, whether you like it or not, right? And to a certain extent, that's the bargain you make when you move to a different place, is that you're adopting the culture of your new homeland, right? The one thing that I feel like has made the biggest difference for our children has actually been to have a peer community that they can relate to. So I would be remiss if I didn't do a shout out to my other home, which is the India Society of Worcester, because we have a youth program where I think the kids find other children who are going through the same kind of cultural transitions as they are, right? Which doesn't mean it's all sort of a homogeneous mix, but that there is some understanding that we're talking about two different cultures here. For a long time, even now in their unguarded moments, my kids will switch accents, right, depending on whether they're talking to who they're talking to, and this idea of that there are two cultures and that we have to find a mix of them. I mean, the parents can do so much, but I think really what makes a huge impact is the surrounding community that we have, and therefore having that community and having not just the school, right, or not just a small limited way of room for interaction, I think makes a huge difference.
And even if we tell them do this, do that because we're Indian, it may not make sense to them, but if we take them to a community where they see other kids like them do that, then they probably think that's probably one of the ways to do it, and it's not wrong to do it that way. So exposure, like you said, being near Chinatown, having people around, learning new culture in the right context, right? So that definitely helps. And as kids grow up, they start thinking about this too. They're socially aware, and at least my daughters, they have set up conversations in association with India Society and other local organizations to talk about Asian kids growing up in a confused culture, and they had seminars, moderated panel discussions, and they're trying to contribute back to the community as well. So I think they've learned something from us and the school system.
Yeah. For us, that wasn't as much problem because American culture won 100%. So my kids are 100% Americans. And the only thing I think we did well is going every summer for vacation in Greece, so they get to know Greece and they get to love Greece. But other than that, there are 100% Americans who go every summer to Greece for vacation. That's it.
I agree. Actually, my children grew up just like Americans.
Yeah.
They never been in China,
Mm.
so they only know they are Americans.
Yeah.
So I do not have that kind of culture conflicts with the kids, and I have to say I'm very lucky at this point, and I think because I got to join the community quite a bit. I attend a church here, and their peers like church peers, they're all mostly Caucasian, so they don't feel like they're any different from others. And then the other things, they play sport when they were younger. So they made a lot of friends. And my son, he has so many rock bands. So, so yeah, it's hard. It is hard to raise. Sometimes we do look at, even say normal American family, every family is different. Different structures, different rules, but do not mean it's easy.
Yeah.
You just have to be patient and supportive.
Now, did any of you find that, okay, you were educated over in India, when you got here, did the school systems or did they honor your degrees? Because I have heard different things, like somebody who was like a regular doctor, a PhD, not PhD, just a regular doctor, couldn't not
Yeah, that is
unless they went like, I don't know how many more years to school.
That is particularly for the doctor, for the medical doctors.
Oh.
But for the rest of the education, I would say actually the education outside the US is a little more advanced. So in other words, someone finishes a bachelor degree in Europe and it's equivalent to a master's degree here. And the reason is that they tend, in Europe at least, I don't know about India, but in Europe they tend to specialize a lot in their undergrad, right? So if I finished a physics degree.
Yeah.
So it was only physics in my bachelor, in my undergrad. It wasn't history and biology and literature. No, it was physics, right?
Yeah.
All the other, it was done in high school, all the other. So it's the equivalent of a master's degree in terms of knowledge. And this is some feedback for the school district as a whole. Maybe, I mean, it's great that it empowers children to grow and become, well-functioning adults and be happy and so on. But I see a little less, I think, focus on academics than it is in other countries. And maybe they overdo it in other countries. I mean, in Greece, it's too much pressure, and in Europe. But I think there is a little less focus here, which I'm not saying that it's bad, it's just different. And that creates a different overall academic experience, because they finish high school and they don't have all the knowledge that they should have. And then they go to college, and the first couple of years they get the extra knowledge that they should have gotten in high school to begin with, right? So this pushes back a little bit the education. So that's the only thing I observed.
Yeah, the expectation is high there, like he said. Like, for example, Ashish said he got 97 percentile and he felt like a failure. So that's the kind of pressure you are in. But it's only the medical degree that needs a recertification here. For me, I came in with a PhD, I was fine, I didn't have to do anything else. But if I had to go back for an MBA or another degree here, I'd have to submit transcripts from my college and stuff. And at that point, we had to have it reevaluated by an organization here. So that requirement would have been in place. But
So,
otherwise,
sorry.
I'm done.
So the one thing that strikes me is, at least in some of the technology fields that I've worked in, right? The education is at least on par, like Cosmos said, if not maybe slightly more rigorous. What's interesting is, and which I think a lot of people who have been born in America don't appreciate, is how outsized, how much more money we spend for that same education, right? So, my son is going off to college, and we're looking at, annual fees ranging from, state schools, $30,000 a year to $75,000 a year. I mean, my engineering degree, and remember, I was sort of the bottom of the barrel, right? So I couldn't go to like the really inexpensive schools in India. So in a private school in India, I paid, 7,000 rupees, which is about $100 a year for an engineering education, right? And I can tell you, and that's the only only degree I have on my resume, and it served me fine for the last 25 years, right? but I mean, there are certainly things about our country that we can bear to look at with a fresh set of eyes, and some of the costs that we have in some of these systems, should be making us angrier than they are. But,
It's the education and the healthcare, the costs that are out of control in America compared to the rest of the world. These two. But talking about education, something that I really appreciate here, and you don't see it, doesn't exist in other countries, I don't think so, it's the flexibility, the freedom, that someone can start college as business major and then they can decide to switch to biology or do something completely different. For us, for me anyway, I had to make a decision 16 years old. What do I have to study? What do I want to become in my life, right? And I made the decision physics. Okay, and that I couldn't change that decision. And the only way to change it, and now I'm a computer scientist, is by coming here and then getting a graduate degree in computer science. But if I had stayed in Greece, or in Europe for that matter, the decision that you make at 16 years old, that's it. It determines the rest of your life. And you don't have the flexibility and the freedom to change. But here it is so easy to switch for the children. They have this amazing flexibility. And even beyond the education, I think this is a theme in America, the freedom of choice, which I find fascinating since I came. Because here you can decide, do I want to live in a desert, in a jungle? Do I want to live in a cold place, in a hot place? Do I want to live in a mega city like New York City or out in no one's land? Where do I want to live? And you can do it. But you don't have this opportunity in other countries. You are more restricted in your choices. So this freedom is, for me, one of the big advantages of living in America.
so you're saying there's a price to pay for that freedom.
Yeah.
It is very true.
That's very true.
I didn't get the opportunity. I didn't have opportunity to attend college when I was younger. So I went to college at 46. I got my degree close to 50 years old. So that's why I'm end up here. So only happened in America.
I know, that's
I talk about bottom of the barrel. So yeah, there's an opportunity. It's unlimited opportunity.
Unlimited opportunity,
Yeah.
And the social mobility. In other countries, where you are born, or your family, or your circumstances determine the rest of your life. But here they don't.
Yeah.
When I came, I don't know about you, but when I came, I was below the poverty level. For me, $1 was a big thing, because I literally came with 2 suitcases and no money.
I say minus. I always say we came from minus.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the proverbial immigrant story.
Yeah.
Came with 2 suitcases and $2 in your pocket.
That's it.
Yeah, I think I belong to that story too.
Yeah, I think
We had to take a big loan to afford the flight tickets to come here, and then you realize over time that think back how much you had to go through to come here, and now life's good. It's a land of opportunities, as you say, and good.
Any other questions? I've got some questions, if folks don't mind.
Yeah.
What are some aspects of your country of origin that you do miss from time to time, or did you miss things early on that you don't miss as much now? If you talk to that.
I think I still miss the childhood, like a Chinese New Year.
Mm.
We celebrate for like a half month. They call it 15 days. Yeah, and you get to wear brand new clothes. They only eat the particular food only served during New Year time. And then you have family members, they all come home. Of course, my dad wasn't home, but I see my uncles, they all join the family during New Year. And they stay home for a long time. Not like us here, like Christmas, few days, kids have to leave home and go back to the normal routine. But that's the thing I miss. And then the other thing I miss is like intimacy with the nature. It was like my house right near the water and the mountain, and then we just every day walk out is nature. So that kind of stuff I miss.
I think it's food and culture related mostly, because in India, we have so many different festivals, and everybody's around you celebrating the same festival at the same time. So when you walk out of your house, you know it's festival day. Right? You know something is happening in the world. And here you have to track your calendar, mark your calendar, check it off, and say, oh, we're supposed to be celebrating this festival today. And then we make it a point to tell the kids what that festival means, because we don't want them to forget the culture and the background and the stories and stuff. So that's an effort, extra effort. So that's one of the things that I miss, the food. And the culture-wise, you know, you can just walk down the street, knock on a door and say, hi, how are you? And you sit down there, you'll stay for lunch, you'll chat, and
Right.
you know, you'll go.
By yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Nobody needs
Yeah.
to invite you to
Right,
their house, right? So that's the culture there. Here you have to plan, make appointments, play dates with kids.
Yes.
Yeah, all of that. So those are probably mainly what I say.
No, I agree with all of those. You know, the thing I miss the most for my kids is actually this the sense of urgency is the only way I can describe it, right? I think you know, growing up at 16, we knew we had to make a decision that would, you know, it was not probably the ideal way to make that decision, and yet I feel like at 16, you know, we were more grown up, right, more mature than I think our kids will be, because it's hard to manufacture that sense of urgency, that sense of competition, right? And you know, there are certainly lots of things that are negative about it, and on balance, probably more negative things than not. But the sense of you know, growing up in a desiring to grow up in a sort of a global world, I think is one of the things I miss for the kids, because I feel like overwhelmingly kids in America are comfortable growing in America, not having to think about, you know, other places in the world, that kind of thing. And that's maybe one thing I miss for the kids is, you know, having this sense of the world much more acutely growing up.
One more thing I want to add is the family, the joint family system that you have in India. And you have parents around, you have uncles, aunts, and the entire family is around close. And usually there's so many people in the house, right? Here when you come, you're a nuclear family, you're your husband and wife and maybe a kid, and the kid has no company. And you have to arrange for daycare or school, some help, etc. So in India, we're used to having so many people around, and sometimes you may not even know where your kid is. In the neighbor's house or your aunt's house, uncle's house. But here it's like more pressure on the parents that way, and you miss that combined family feeling.
Yeah, I agree. It's the social connection that I miss here the most compared to my country. We live in a beautiful neighborhood, beautiful houses, there are sidewalks. We have a dog. I take the dog out for a walk. I can walk for a whole hour and see like 2 people, maybe, for a whole hour. If I was in Greece, I would have seen 100 people. I would probably knew, 20 of them, right? And actually, I brought my sister here over the summer. She came to visit first time, and she says, "Wow, beautiful houses. Where are all the people? Where are the people?" I said, "I don't know. They're watching TV or something. Why they're not walking outside? It's so beautiful. I don't know why." So this is what I miss: the social connection and the fact that there are people like next house and I don't even know them. We never see each other. I never talk to them, and I don't even know them, which is something unthinkable in places like Greece, where your neighbors are probably some of your best friends, and you do things together. you know, like Raghu said, your kids may be playing with their kids, but here this is missing.
Yeah. And they're in your business all the time.
Yeah.
The neighbors, everybody poking their nose into it. Yeah.
Well, that we don't miss, but you're right.
When we moved to our street, during that, it was 1994, yeah. Our street was a brand new subdivision, so every year we will have a block party, which I miss that. And then our kids and neighbors' kids they're similar ages, you know. And then I have made so many best friends through my neighborhood.
Nice.
Because we were all stay-home mom, so we get to communicate. I think communication is one of the key things. Yeah, I don't see now. I'm still living in the same neighborhood, but the block party is disappear. I miss that one.
The same thing happened to us. In the
Yeah.
beginning, the first couple of years, few
Yes.
years, we had some block parties, but then they disappear, they
Yeah.
stop. I think when it's a new neighborhood and many new families
It
come in,
changes.
they want to
Yeah.
establish the relationship. But
Well-
then after a while, this goes
Yes.
away. Everybody makes their own circles of friends, and no need anymore for this kind of connection. And later in life, if I was in Greece and my kids were growing up in Greece, I knew that we would be around each other, right? Probably the same city, probably. Here, I'm afraid that we might be here, and one kid be in California, she's already is, and the other will be in Florida, the other in Minnesota, right? So we'll be spread throughout the whole country, I'm afraid, because this is the norm here. So that's,
Yeah,
that's
the
something
freedom
that bothers
applies
me
to
a
them
little
too, right?
bit. That's right. They have freedom to. Yeah.
I'd like to say, I grew up in the 50s, and we played outside all day, and would go in for dinner, and would go back outside, and would be told to come in when the street lights come on. And I remember thinking, why is it that kids have to be outside all the time? I loved it. I feel bad for the kids now, because they don't have that anymore. But, so we had great freedom. It was completely different. I never see kids anymore in the world.
Yeah.
I never see
I grew
kids
up with that
riding their
too.
bikes, or, so this country has been different.
But I feel like it's changing even not just here. When I go back to visit in India, India is not the same India that I grew up in, right? I mean, kids are much more regimented. They have after-school activities. They don't get home till 6:30 in the night, right? So I wonder if it's just, time marching on,
Could be.
Evolution.
So some of the differences that we observe, we have to be careful because some of them is different generations.
Yeah.
It's not so much different countries, but it's different generations.
Yeah. The tragedy is that I fear that the kids won't have the appreciation for what nature does for you without you even realizing it. It's so healing. And I'm afraid these kids are in on their phones all the time, and I know they're missing that, so I hope somehow, I think the pandemic, ironically, brought a lot of that back. People I see outside walking and, on trails and cars everywhere that I never used to see them, so I'm
No,
thankful
that's-
to the pandemic for that.
There's very real implications. So just this morning, I was reading an article in The Atlantic that not just in America, but everywhere in the world, there's an epidemic of children, young children with myopia, right, getting glasses.
Oh,
And they've been looking at, what are the reasons for, more and more kids at a younger and younger age are having to get glasses. And one of the biggest reasons is that compared to kids of previous generation, they just don't have enough activities where they have to look as far. Right. And if you think about that, you realize, oh my God, we're in a small room, we're looking at a screen, then you go home, right? And you're not in a place where you have to look,
Not training your eye
a
to
few
see
hundred
far.
meters,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Use and disuse theory. So that's some feedback for the school system. More
We're
nature,
trying to work on that.
nature-based program.
outside.
Well, so just as an aside, you have, Floral Street School that has that beautiful nature trail. Coolidge School has Jordan Pond right behind us, and so we do utilize that. I'm not sure what the new BLUs is yet, and I don't know about the other schools, but, there are things that we do, and about the screen time too, we try to be really mindful of that. COVID certainly did a number on all of us when we went. I was teaching totally online, for the year where some kids were coming in hybrid, and then, we survived it, and we made connections, we made a community. But I was so grateful last year when I had my class come into my classroom. It's just such a different experience, and just the socialization, the social piece of getting along, working together is just so important. But we are trying to mitigate some of that screen time though too, because that's really tricky.
Yeah.
Talking about nature, if I may, Mike.
Oh, yeah,
I
sure.
have a question. What are your memories of the first New England winter?
My most memorable New England winter was probably, I came in July. It was like midsummer, and by December I took driving lessons and got my driver's license. And I never drove in India, so this was the first time I was doing it. And I got a fantastic Toyota Corolla 93 model stick shift, right? And I'm like, oh, this is great, I'm gonna drive this. And it had started snowing, and I was driving into, I didn't have to drive to work, but I was driving into work because I lived like 4 blocks from, and I had a car, so I wanted to drive. So I was driving and I see the red light and I jam on the brakes, and my car does a 360. I'm like, I hate winter in New England. Yeah, I came back home, parked the car, didn't take it out for the entire season.
So I'll do the opposite of that, right? So my, you asked what's the most enduring memory of winter. I mean, I probably don't remember the first time I saw snow. But what I do remember is, so I came here it was in August, I think. And so, very close to winter. But I remember the first sort of warm day we had the following March. And I can still picture it, right? Just that feeling of happiness that you get when you walk outside, right? After a cold winter. And I learned later that one of the Scandinavian languages actually has a word to describe that happiness that you get on the first day of spring. And so that's my sort of just counterpoint to your story.
But it was a great feeling seeing snow falling, right? Because I'd never seen snow. It was an amazing feeling. Just walked and walked and walked around till we got frozen.
Oh yeah. I was very excited for the first winter here because I came from Louisiana, and Louisiana is extremely hot. And I was so happy to go to a place that not only is not hot, but it has snow, because I treasured snow. Growing up in Greece, for us snow was something unique. You would go to a mountain, maybe do some skiing, but it was a gift to have snow, right? So I came here and was so happy. I will have snow for 3 months, 4 months. And this happiness lasted for a few years, and it started becoming less and less. And now I'm not looking forward to snow anymore. Actually, I'm looking forward to maybe take off in the winter and go to a warmer place. But yeah, and I was very much surprised the first winter. I remember I didn't know how cold it can get. And I remember I took my car to the mechanic. So I left my car, and it would be an hour or so. So I decided to go for coffee. It was like 15 minutes walk. And I started walking, and I remember my legs were hurting from the cold. It was so cold, which I never experienced in my life before. And since then I realized how over in the wintertime when it's cold, how tense you get, your body. And like you said, when it's warm, you relax finally. And it's this amazing feeling when the weather is nice and it's not super cold.
or
I don't
Louisiana,
mind.
where it's warm every day.
It's hot in the summer particularly.
I don't mind Massachusetts snow. And
'Cause
then
you stayed in
it's
upstate
upstate New York. We lived there for
Oh.
2.5 years. The snow, we had a split and like what they call split entry, like one level. But then the garage and the door, it was like covered. The garage door totally covered. And then we get like 200 some days of rainy day, cloudy days. You don't see sun. I find I love Massachusetts. Beautiful weather most of the days. We get sunshines. Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
I rather have a spring or summer here, but yeah, it's winter. I think that's why we appreciate spring and summer more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a winter.
But in Shrewsbury, we are lucky. It gets a lot of sunny days,
Yeah.
even when it's very cold. At least
Yeah,
it's sunny.
it's sun, yeah.
More than Boston, actually. Boston has more cloud. It could be cloudy in Boston, but sunny here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
sun in the
Sun
winter
is the
time.
most important.
Yeah.
I think the Worcester Hill kind of protects us
Yeah.
from the clouds because of it.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly don't have the worst winters. I remember once driving in Rochester, Minnesota in the middle of winter.
No.
Yeah.
And they have signs for snowmobilers in places that say, watch out for the power lines.
We've
And I
had a
think-
few storms like that, but they're not as consistent. But we've had a few blizzards that have lasted, that have been fun.
I think the year we came in, the first winter was bad. 83, winter of 83 was really bad. 93, sorry. And Connecticut, I think we got like 50 or 60 inches of snow that season. And we are like from no snow to buried in snow, and it's crazy. Yeah.
So, a little bit of a different kind of question. Have there been times or a time when you've been made to feel like an outsider because you're an immigrant? What was that experience like?
For me, it's like maybe long time ago. But other than that, I don't really feel like it now. It depends how you view it. At the beginning, when I first came to U.S., I couldn't speak I can only speak a few words of English. So, and then gradually changed. At that time, I feel normal, okay, because my English was so poor. So I kind of accept that. Then later on, as I learn, I speak a little better, improving myself. And then a lot of time when you go somewhere, especially in the South, people don't really see Asian faces, right? And when they look at you, and kind of question mark. Then once you started talking to them, have a conversation, and they feel okay. But that only like a little experience like that for me, and I feel like outsider. And the other things like when I was learning the processing, raising my children, like proms, we never feel like what is a prom, right? Then we had to do research. Thank goodness I sent all my kids to prom. So then right now you ask me, it's very normal. It's a part of my tradition now. So, and I'm very lucky that I don't feel that way anymore.
I've only heard stories about being discriminated against, or some of my friends telling, don't go into this area, stay away from that area. For example, when we had come into Connecticut, we'd go a couple times to New Jersey because they had good Indian stores for groceries. We'd go there, buy groceries, and come back. In New York or New Jersey, and they'd say, don't go into Jackson Heights area, it's not safe, and things like that. So I personally didn't face any of that discrimination or feel unwelcome. But there's one incident that actually stayed in my mind. probably I was just making it up, but I was in Maine visiting for an interview, for a job interview, and I got into a restaurant, and we sat there, husband, wife, and one kid, and it took ages for them to even come and talk to us and get us into the restaurant. So at that moment, I kind of felt discriminated against, but I left it there and said, how does it matter at this point, right? You find another restaurant, or you just wait till you get called in and then have your dinner and leave. So, yeah. But I don't see that happening now because it's more, we live more in metropolitan, more open places where people are more progressive and stuff, and they know that it's a melting pot, right? And I've stayed closer to educational institutions and biotech industries and stuff, and it's more mixed culture. So I don't feel that anymore.
I completely agree. Certainly don't have any personal experience that I can think of. But I do work with a lot of immigrants now, right? Even down in Worcester. And I think two things make a difference, right? One is the type of environment that we live in, right? Certainly in the technology world, there's a lot of acceptance, right, of diversity because there just happens to be more a diverse workforce. Every job I've had, right, it has been in a diverse workforce like that. So there are certainly pockets, right, where that's not the case, right? There are occupations, there are geographical pockets where that's not the case. And I do hear of, like with anything else, right? Anything that's new and unknown sometimes is disconcerting, right? But after hearing every story that I've had told to me, I still believe, right, that if we had to sort of capture the spirit of America in one word, it's still, in my mind, is still a welcoming place, right?
Yeah. Well, it definitely depends where you are in the country, and I think Massachusetts is pretty welcoming and open to foreign because there is a lot of foreigners. We're in the coast, right? Same thing with California, but in other places of the country where they don't see many foreigners, I think it's a little different. And I heard stories. I never heard personally anything. I didn't feel discriminated, but I heard from other people incidents like that. But it always depends where you are and what are your circles. Like Assis said, we're in the high tech, and there are a lot of foreigners in high tech. And it's also in academia. When I was in graduate school, was probably, computer science department was probably 90% foreigners and 10% Americans. So, you cannot, it's hard to feel discriminated in a place like that. Maybe in other areas of the country or in other circles, maybe there will be incidents like this. Yeah, and like it's in every country in the world. America is not different than Germany, Europe, so many countries, and I'm sure in Asia, other countries, so it's the same everywhere. Nothing different here.
Well, if when you go to point of discrimination part, in your own culture, your own countries,
Yeah,
you go to
that's right.
discriminate
That's right.
to each other,
Yeah.
That's things that is not going to disappear, and we just have to learn and move forward.
Yeah.
So I think we're just about ready to wrap up. So I don't know if anybody has any other final questions or anything they want to toss out there. I thought it might be nice to end on a question of, you all initially started talking about your experiences immigrating. You talked a little bit about coming to the U.S. and it felt a little alien and not quite like home. What were some of the experiences that you had here when it did start to feel like home? when it started to feel like this is, you know, this is my country.
It's a good question. I
Well,
think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think after I became U.S. citizen, that was 1989, and then first time I was able to go to vote, that I consider myself American. I say that's because the only passport I have now is American passport. I don't have a second one. You can send me to anywhere, unfortunately. Yeah. So that's how I feel.
That might be true for most immigrants because when you're on a visa or on a temporary status, you're always wondering, when is this going to change, and you don't have that sense of belonging and staying. So for me, I think after 2 years of coming in here, I got my green card, and as soon as you have that green card in your hand, you're like, okay, now I can survive no matter what, and this is home. And maybe the second incident is when you buy your house, or you have a baby, and it's like, oh, we're a family now, and we have to make this our family, our place. And I think those are two other instances when that got changed.
I agree with that. Probably it's a very interesting question, right? Is there a time? I'm going to say, it was probably the time that I made a first friend who was not, an Indian immigrant, right? To me, that was the time I felt like, this is home.
Interesting, yeah. My experience is the same as yours, that it was the day that I became American citizen. And I felt so proud, and I felt, okay, now I am American. Because until that day, I wasn't sure. Will I be able to stay here long term? Not? What's going on? But then I felt almost even more American than the people born here, because I thought, this is the history of America. It's the immigrant who comes to this place. And this is who I am. I'm the immigrant who came to this place.
Yeah.
You get to vote and then you get called for jury duty.
That's when you feel like an American.
Done that, yeah.
Yeah, but it's been great. It's been almost 30 years for me now in the US, and love it.
So Danny, the four of you, do you have any final words for our attendees? Or?
Oh, great. Thank you for arranging this conversation.
Welcome.
And I think, you started with, do you feel welcome, right? Or did you feel welcome? And I think, it's little gestures like this that help us understand each other, right? So thank you for doing it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's particularly important now that Shrewsbury changes, the population mixture changes, and this kind of conversations, I think, are very important to have.
Very good.
All right, well, thank you all for attending. I hope this was an engaging educational experience for you all. I certainly had a great time just listening to everyone talk and exchange ideas, and just seeing all of the shared commonality that that we all have. There's so much overlap between everyone's experiences, regardless of where they're coming from. So thank you to our
Thank you. Thank you.